Should you study theology? Now, obviously, there's a lot of angles you could approach this from. And I'm going to give you my own personal take on this. So let's get into it. Today, I'm just going to really briefly unpack my thoughts on whether or not it's a good idea, it's worth your time, money, energy, anxiety, stress, all those things to study theology, particularly as it pertains to like a college education, a bachelor's degree, maybe even a master's degree or beyond. But also in the sense that, is it worth it at all? Is there a reason to study theology? So like a bit of a spoiler alert, and I'll jump ahead to this right now just to like clear the air. Of course, there's a reason you should be studying theology. What is the point of the Christian life? It's to come to know, love, and serve and be with God, right? We want to be with our Creator, the one who made us. You know, why did God make man? So that we can know Him, love Him, serve Him, be with Him in this life and the next. Right? We're gonna spend eternity beholding and meditating on what in the West we identify as the beatific vision, and which is wrapped up in this concept they use in the East called theosis or divinization. So to reiterate, yes, it is worth it to study theology, but at the same time, it's difficult, right? Because we get into the weeds. Like I have a bachelor's degree in theology. I have a master's degree in theology. And so both of those times were really great experiences. I loved residential study. So I would always recommend that sort of thing if you can afford it, as opposed to purely online or distance, if you have the opportunity to do it. But again, there's a lot of really great resources and opportunities and all those kind of things that we have now because of the internet and because of so many resources that are being made available to us. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna take this from like sort of two tracks. So number one is assuming that you're asking me, should I study theology as a bachelor's degree? So, of course, number one, I would say, where are you hoping to do that? So there's some questions, and I can make a separate video. Let me know in the comments below if you think it would be helpful or fruitful to get into comparing theological programs at different schools here in the U.S. and abroad. I would definitely be interested in doing some comparative analysis there. One, because I look back on my time and my undergraduate for my studies, that there are things that I think were definitely incredibly fruitful and really, really helpful. And also some things academically that I wish I had more experience in, or someone had told me, if you think you might do this, then like go down this rabbit hole. And I didn't do some of those things. So I'd be happy to do that. Let me know in the comments below. So that being bracketed, assuming you're looking at a couple of schools, what I would say generally, if you're not Catholic or Orthodox or something like that, you're a Protestant and you're looking at an evangelical school, look at something that has a really strong track record of putting out great theologians and really great faculty who you think you would want to learn from. And this is going to be true both for undergrad and for graduate school. But it's particularly important in undergrad. If you're thinking like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, I have no idea. Am I going to go all the way down this rabbit hole? Am I going to like just drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and become like a theologian? And I didn't begin my studies in theology thinking I was going to like continue even going on to get a master's degree. My goal in getting my bachelor's degree was just simply put to learn more about my faith. I wanted to like be immersed in it. And that was the same impetus that led me to the master's as well, although part of that was formation for seminary studies and it was required. But that being said, like that's the goal, right? Is your motivation, you just really love this stuff. You're interested in your faith. You've taken it seriously your whole life and you want to learn more. Is that your motivation? Or is it something more like, I don't know, like do you feel pressured? So any academic study that is purely outside, like an external motivator, someone else pushing it in for you, that's going to be a little bit harder to stick it through when the rubber hits the road. But you can do it. Obviously internal motivations can be generated from that external motivation. You can, internalize that yourself and take it. That's 100% possible. But all that to say, I think if you're looking at this program, looking at this from a standpoint of like, listen, I want to learn more about my faith. So you're going to look for programs, evangelical, Catholic, wherever you are in this, that are Orthodox, little o, Orthodox, in the sense that they're not causing any waves with the way that they're putting out both students, alumni, and some of the papers, maybe things that are produced and all that. The evangelical undergraduate program that I went to, which was rigorous in a lot of ways, was was broadly non-denominational, and so it was definitely not the things that I was lacking where I would not have the opportunity to dive into in that setting would have been things like liturgical Christianity, some of the creedal things, which I've learned since, and even they were doing this when I was a student there towards the end of my time, they were definitely adding some of those programs in. So that's something to look into too. Now, ultimately, you're looking at an undergrad program, and you're going to be curious about a few things, right? So, what is the shape of that curriculum? I'm assuming it's a 4-year degree. What kind of things are you going to be studying? You want rudimentary things. There's going to be like an Old New Testament survey, that sort of thing, and then some general book studies. You're probably going to have our hermeneutics. So I'm throwing words at you that you may or may not know. Hermeneutics is like the study of the text. It's like the science of textual criticism, which is like a nasty word in this house, but anyway, I would say that you need to be familiar with these sorts of things. So if you're serious about learning about your faith, you want to be able to access all the tools. Like, say this is it, so you're not going to go on to anything else study-wise. Then yeah, sure, you want to be able to know how to dive into all the resources you have. And there's a ton of resources out there. There's programs like Logos and a few other things that are like really, really incredibly robust, and they have a lot of opportunity for lay people or ministers to be able to dive into unpacking things like with sort of digital format, ebooks, that kind of stuff. So you're able to dive in interlinear things. But if you don't have the background in things like biblical languages, it's going to make it a little more difficult to know what you're actually dealing with. So I would also say that from my own experience, one of the most robust things that was helpful for me was also having a philosophy component. I mean, it doesn't have to be full on like a Catholic seminary that would dive really hardcore into requiring you to actually study philosophy, but you need to have something to help you understand, because it shaped all of the previous thinkers, and it also helps you understand where the thinking is kind of going today. So all of that was assuming, yeah, I want to go in and I want to study theology, and maybe this is where I'm going to stop. I'm going to go study theology, get a bachelor's maybe of science or bachelor's of arts in Bible or religion or religious studies, something like that. And there's a ton of really great schools, no matter what your denominational stripe is. I'm Catholic, so I'm going to lean further in those directions, even though the program that I went to really formed me and helped me be a better Catholic, I think. But it also was not designed, I didn't follow the rules with that. I went outside the instructions on the tin by becoming Catholic using the resources I have. So I would say there's a ton of great schools out there that could have this program, and they're all going to have some similar things. You're going to deal with, textual criticism. You're going to learn about biblical languages. You're also going to learn philosophy. You're going to learn a few in-depth book studies, and you're going to write and read a lot. By the end of that program, you're going to actually have a lot of foundational information to help you really dive in your free time. No matter what you do following your undergraduate career, you're going to go on and be able to, with that bachelor's degree, not be necessarily very marketable outside of working in churches, but a theological degree is more about an internal shaping and molding of the heart and mind and soul, rather than the pursuit of wealth. You cannot serve both God and mammon. So I'm just gonna drop that there as probably a justification for all of the time, money, and energy that I've spent in pursuit of theological education. In addition to that, right, in addition to the fact that we are not only you study this as a bachelor's degree, you could also go on to study and the master's level. And so maybe you're asking yourself, all right, so I've got a bachelor's degree, maybe in theology, Bible, something like that, like myself, or maybe something different, history, writing, business, I don't know, whatever it is, science. But you're like, I'm really actually very interested in learning more about my faith. And this graduate level seems like a place where I could really dive in, do a thesis, or just learn a little bit more about, is that worth it? And I would say, on the whole, yes, absolutely. I was so blessed, and I have continued to be blessed. My family has been blessed by what I learned when I was working on my master's degree. And it took me a little while longer than it was supposed to, because I dropped out of seminary whenever I converted. More about that in later videos. But that was a bit of a complication on my my seminary process. But we got through it, and it really shaped my my outlook. It shaped my worldview, obviously, and also shaped the opportunities for me looking forward into the future. And then maybe you want to know, well, is the final frontier, is it worth it to go and get like a postgraduate degree? Should you get like a PhD or another master's degree and some kind of when you want to write more papers or something? And you're going down a rabbit trail that I will confess that is a place that I spend a lot of my time wondering, is that somewhere that God is calling me? And so this is where I want to get into a second sort of a related to that first point that we brought up at the beginning. Why do you study theology in the first place? So we study theology to learn about God. We study theology to learn more about him, to find our place in the world, the universe, and to find out what he wants us to do with the gifts and talents that he's given us, and then offer them back to him. Now, when we study theology, we're learning more about God, but obviously God is completely outside of our ability to know. Therefore, it's kind of difficult. Theology is not a zero sum sort of thing. But it is. We're doing a lot of guesswork with really educated guesses. But theology is definitely not one of those things where, to me, and there are people who disagree with me on this, because the sort of the systematics approach has a wonderful place as long as you have the end in mind. That like St. Thomas Aquinas, Bonaventure, some of the other doctors of the church that kept this sort of like in their wheelhouse. And obviously this is definitely true when you're looking at some of the Eastern Christian writers. But when you look at the study of God and from a systematics approach, systematics are great. Dogmatics, as they would say in more the Latin Western Catholic world. But if you're looking at that from that perspective, you're sort of narrowing down into fields, things like eschatology, soteriology, ecclesiology, all of these ologies that are about helping us understand the broad science or study of theology. And you want to know, maybe is that worth it, right? How does that shape us? So this is getting back to my fundamental question, right? When we break down, compartmentalize God into these categories, you're also dealing with some very important ideas. And one of the things that I would ask you to pause on is, wondering, okay, so if that is true, if we can break down God and break down the study of God, rather, you can't break down God, but when you break down the study of God and the science, this love of what that looks like into these parts, there's a temptation and a tendency then to try to have a sense of mastery over these things. In that this is the danger, and this happens at the very beginning of your theological education experience. So when you're in undergrad and you're sitting there and you're like, studying your hermeneutics, and you're like, man, I know so much about this, but I'm learning so many things. Why did no one ever tell me this stuff? And you go home for Christmas and the pastor's like preaching on something, and he's like, wow, dude, that was completely wrong. The text doesn't say that. In the Hebrew, it says this. And you're like puffed up, Remember, there's this line in St. Paul talks about knowledge puffs up, a little knowledge puffs up. And so this is danger of being an inflated, false, bloated thing. And so my counsel for you, if you're looking into this, even if you'd never go and actually get a formal degree, and you're just like, Joe theologian lay armchair, sitting in the thing, watching your YouTube channels. Hey, click that like button while you're at it. If you're watching YouTube channels on theology like mine, which is not a bad thing. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing this if I thought it was negative. But it can lead to this sense of like, I know something that no one else does, or that few other people do. There's an exclusivity to it. And to a point, that's absolutely true. But, like the whole like Spider-Man, Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. That's incredibly true. And it's also very biblical. Or to whom much has been given, much will be expected. So those in authority, there's this heavy weight. And I've talked to other theologians in my time working in church and all these sorts of things that, there definitely is pressure there, right? So I feel it, that, because I've spent all this time and money, and I've had the privilege of really diving into these things in a deep way. God expects more of me in knowing my faith than he does other people that don't have this, that didn't have access to the same resources that I've had. Which also means that's one of the reasons that I have this channel, is so that I can sort of unpack that and share it with a broader audience, and hopefully be a part of a wider conversation to know better and love better the God who made us and the faith that we are shaped by. So, going back to the thing I was trying to say before I distracted myself, which, it's me. But going back to that point of, when we have this breaking down the idea of all these things, and you're trying to master it, and you've gone home for the weekend, and so you can see how like this superiority complex is incredibly dangerous, and it's not a place you want to be, spiritually speaking. So remember, keep in mind, what is the goal? Keep the end in mind. The end is union with God, right? It's theosis, it's divinization, it's the beatific vision, it's beholding him face to face, as St. Paul says, right? Not today, it's through the mirror dimly, but then, on that day, seeing him face to face. That's the goal. And so I give you that counsel as a long preamble, just to remind us and remind myself of things we have to be careful for when we are studying theology. So as I said, even if you're not going through this, you decide, I'm just going to like study this on my side, on the side, not going on to get a degree. That's completely understandable. But you still have the same danger and responsibility. One of the big like challenges that you're going to run into if you don't get a formal exposure, like an actual academic setting, is it's just sort of like this with publishing. So in the publishing world, so this is I promise this will make sense. In the publishing world, there are gatekeepers, historically, traditionally, to make sure that books are well written before they get into the public. Otherwise, the publisher looks bad, right? So you have editors, you have agents, whatever. And so in a sense, in the academy, also historically was supposed to provide a kind of gatekeeper. That hasn't always been the case, especially as time has gone on. There's been a lot of really crazy stuff to come out of the academic world, and I'm not going to pretend that's not true. I've had recent experience which was eye-opening to me, not specifically in the theological world, but in the philosophical sciences, psychology, that kind of stuff. That wow, you could be very well educated, but also not really doing an incredible job of controlling information and sharing that with an audience that isn't well formed to digest it in a way that can wind up really doing a lot of psychological damage. Not getting into that right now, but since that is the case, in a good school, in a school that is doing its best to really trying to keep a biblical, Christocentric worldview in the way that it's forming and shaping students, you are protected as a student much better than if your only access to theological material is people like me online that you don't really know. And there's lots of really incredible people on YouTube. People who have great podcasts. People that are working so hard to do what I want to do and what I'm trying to do here in different ways, and in some ways, like so many better ways. But one of the things that I would counsel you on is really just making sure that you're just kind of weighing that out as you're looking at this. So to recap, we're looking at track 1 here, my sort of track 1, which is actually formally going on to get some education, whether it's an associate's degree, like some kind of certificate in something from one of these incredible schools like Augustine Institute in the Catholic world has great resources. There's the Institute for Catholic Culture, which also puts out incredible like courses and sort of summaries. So these are really great places where you can really dive into in a short period of time, really like come to grips with your faith. And that is not actually going to get a like formal degree in the academic world in that sense, but you're learning to live in that world, and that those gatekeepers are there. So I'm just going to say that's part of this like track 1, and that's like maybe track point 5. Theology, not math. To be a theologian means to be someone who's identifying with the study of God and who's being shaped by that. Now, every single Christian is called to know and love the Lord, and also then to know and love their faith and to study it. So no matter how you're doing that, if it's at church, if it's through Bible studies, it's through programs you have on the side, things that you're doing to help shape the way that love and serve the Lord, that is going to be a huge part of every Christian's experience. There's great books, all those sorts of things. So if no matter how you're doing it, you are called as a Christian to study your faith and to be prepared, as St. Peter says, to give an answer for the reason, the hope that is in you. So we're all called to do that. Those of us who just can't shake this bug and really love the study of theology, you're going through something sort of similar to a discernment process, right? So just like someone who is coming into discerning the religious life or the priesthood or just the ordained life in general, for even studying for the diaconate or for the priesthood, and men and women for the religious life, looking into becoming a theologian is also very similar. There's a discernment process. Like all Christians are called to be to study their faith, but not all Christians are called to be like strong teachers of the faith, to really wrestle with these things at a more intense and focused level. Now, those of us who feel we can't help it, some of us are forced into it, like me. I told you I didn't plan on doing this, but here I am, and this channel is part of that, of me trying to wrestle with this, and honestly, give me a place to help work through some of these thoughts, and hopefully have you guys be part of that as well. If this has been helpful for you, if these resources, this channel in particular, but this video, the things that kind of I'm diving into, let me know by clicking the like button so I know that this kind of content is helpful for you, and then maybe others can find it as well. And this is going to be a takeaway for me no matter what. Should you study theology? Well, yeah, obviously everyone should study theology. Should you become an academic theologian? Well, that's harder. That is a discernment process. What I would recommend you do is reach out to people who you trust, your family. If you do have friends or family, people who you've been like kind of talking about this stuff with, I mean, can they see you going on to study theology? And this is like the fundamental sort of discernment process beginning. Like you're going to go to college and study theology. Do you think I could do this? Like, hey, if you do good friends, you have good friends you can talk about these things with, parents, a pastor. I'm really thinking about doing this, and I'm just really drawn towards studying these things. I mean, do you have any advice, right? So there's that general fundamental stuff that helps just to kind of like break the tension, break the ice there at the beginning. But if you've already really kind of like gone in this process and you're in school, you've got a bachelor's degree, and you're thinking, man, I don't know, like I really kind of like want to do this master's thing. I want to keep doing this. I want to keep staying in the theological world. I love it. Which, again, that is a sign that we're kind of in a place we should be, where all of our gifts are kind of like coalescing. You talk about Venn diagram kind of stuff. That's a good thing. And there's no reason God didn't, He didn't design us to be, out of sync with the gifts and the vocation that He's given us. They should go together. They complement one another, right? So, anyway. If that's the case, and you feel like I really do love this and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, talk to some of your professors. I'm happy to help you discern this. If I don't know you personally, it'll be a longer conversation. But reach out to your professors, to some of the folks that you trust, and ask for their advice. Like, what is it like getting a master's degree? What is it like getting a PhD? Is that something that would be, in whatever state of life you're in, whatever season of life you're in, is that something that's feasible? If you're married, like I am, and you've got a family like I do, you're looking at certain things, like if you're looking at a further study, then you have to ask yourself a couple of really pragmatic questions. And this is also true for those who are wanting to go and study for the bachelor's degree as well. Is it feasible in this season of life, right? Can I afford it? And that doesn't just mean financially, because there's scholarships. If you work your tush off, you will be able to get some scholarships, and with grace, you'll have the opportunity you need to pay for that with like a minimum amount of debt. I'm never going to encourage people to just like stack up the debt and the loans, because one, fiscally, that's just like that's kind of like slavery. You're indenturing yourself for a long period of time. That's not awesome. But two, you're not really guaranteed a return on that investment in the financially, as I wasn't, when I got my bachelor's degree, right? It didn't necessarily pay off in the sense that, I was able to then immediately go to work doing theological things in a church. I may have been able to if things went a little bit differently in my life, but you get what I mean. So that's going to be like sort of consideration number one. Should you study theology? One, can you afford it? Two, do you have the time? Can you set aside 4 years for a bachelor's degree, or 3 to 4 years for whatever kind of master's degree you're looking at? And that's also going to be true for a doctorate. But if you're looking at a PhD, you're already to a point where you've done this enough to know, like, I'm passionate about this. And I don't have a PhD. So there's other channels where you can look at some of these things, and I'll let you do that Googling. And the jury is out from what I've seen, the research I've done, on whether or not you should get a PhD. So the biggest thing I would say is, if all education, you should do it if you feel passionate towards it. Don't go study something just because you think there's money involved. Because money's great. You need money to live. But don't chase a degree just for money. Everyone I know who's done that was absolutely miserable. They hated it. Some people chase the thing for they chase the degree for the money, and they love what they do, and that's win-win-win, right? So for people like me who study theology, there's no money in it. So the temptation to make money doing, chasing the degree for money, that wasn't part of it. But studying theology is its own reward, which all learning is supposed to be. You can read C.S. Lewis on that. But so studying theology, getting that reward of learning more and more and more about how much God loves us, and this unfolding image of His face through some sense negative theology, knowing what God is based by comparing Him to what He is not. Anyway, there you go. More theological jargon that you planned on getting, but maybe you did plan on it because you're watching this video. Anyway. So again, that's the point. We're diving into the study of theology because theology is its own reward. The knowledge, the wisdom of that is its own reward. But that also kind of comes back to the point I was trying to make. Can you afford it? Do you have the money? Do you have the time? Do you have, and this is not a slight on anyone, because anyone can do this if they're willing to put in the work. But do you have like the skill set necessary to be a theological student? These are skills that can be learned. Taking notes, learning how to read books efficiently, not quickly, but efficiently, all that kind of stuff. Like, if this is something you're passionate about, all that'll take care of itself. But if you're like, I don't know, like mechanically, do I have the mechanical need? Can I do it? You probably can, because everyone can if you're committed to knowing, loving, and serving your Lord. But that is also something to kind of think about too, because it's not easy, right? You're studying a lot, and if you have a family like I do, you're juggling, you're spending a lot of time and money and energy. And you're exhausted. I was a lot younger than I am now when I started all of this, and I had fewer kids when I started all of this. And so looking into the potential, down the road of doing more study, that's a realization that I have for myself. Like, if I do it, it's not going to look the same as it did when I was 18. It's not going to look the same as it did when I was like 22. It's going to be a little bit of a different process, and so that's fine. Like, that's something to just to accept. Let that season wash over you. So, should you study theology? I'm just going to give you my honest take on that here. Yeah, I think you absolutely should. If you're remotely like me, I love it. I love everything about studying theology. I think if you're remotely interested in growing in your knowledge and love of God, then at some capacity you should be studying theology. Of course you should. But that doesn't mean you have to go and get a college degree. Definitely doesn't mean you have to go get a master's or a doctorate, right? Let the love of God be its own reward, obviously, and be formed and shaped by that wherever you are in this. But I will say that if you have the ability to do it, you have the opportunity to do it, you have the time, the resources, all these things kind of coming together, then don't hesitate, right? Find a good school, do your research. I'm happy to help as a part of that. You can reach out to me for some of that information. Again, if you guys want more of like a robust comparative video talking about a few different schools, I'm really happy to do that. I think it'll be a really fun process and illuminating for me anyway as I'm looking at different programs. But if you're interested in growing in your knowledge and love of God, growing in the faith, I would definitely not hesitate to go and study even like a certificate or something like that. You won't regret. You won't regret the knowledge that you have. You won't regret your growth and your ability to understand more about who God is. But also, I'm not going to say that that it doesn't come without its cost, right? So there are costs. It's not easy. It's a challenge. But everything that is worth doing takes time. So I would definitely say that if you want to do it, do it. And if you don't, think again, and maybe you do want to do it.